Well, there are a couple new phases around table and in Zoom. Why don't we go around and introduce ourselves again?
Okay, I'm Dave Williams, and with the generosity of Robert Fogarty, who can't be here today and next week. Looking forward to this very much.
My name's Jerry Sweeney, and Sam and I are in a poetry group together. I was eager to get involved here. I've been working on the 1920s with some creative work for the past year, so this is the second time this year that I've read Hemingway's. So.
I'm Dick Talabon.
Ann Rosenwald.
Sam VanNest.
Suzanne Sanders.
Peggy Gunderman.
Will Dennehy.
Emily.
They're muted.
Emily Miller.
They're muted.
Yeah, I just sent her a request to unmute. There you go.
Hi.
Hi.
Sharon.
She's muted. They're all muted.
Sharon Harrington. It's not working. You're not hearing me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
And Davis.
Yes, hello, Ann Davis.
All right, I think that's something. Why don't we start, Dick? And we're talking about, like, are these people having any fun?
Yeah, you know, I was just dwelling on the name of the book. The Sun Also Rises, I think, which I know it was referred to in the book, I don't remember where it came from. But the implication to me is life sucks, but the sun also rises. These people will be replaced someday.
Suzanne,
I thought in a different way, was that before I knew where it came from, I always thought it was, well, we see the sun set all the time. We don't very often see it rise because we're drunk in bed.
well, the title takes its inspiration from a quote from the book of Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, it comes from one generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also riseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to the place where he arose. The wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to its circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, and the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again.
So it has to do with that cycle of life, as it were. And my interpretation of it is that the cycle is kind of unbroken by the war and everything.
Yeah, probably so.
Okay.
That's the only thing hopeful in the whole book.
Right. Well, another aspect, Dick, of them, like, is anyone even enjoying themselves, particularly in all their drinking, and that.
Yeah. It seems that the drinking is more related to trying to deaden themselves than to actually have fun. I don't remember a single laugh in the whole book. There was just nothing funny in it. Nothing funny happened or said, at least from my perspective. These people sound perfectly miserable to me.
Yeah.
But they bring in funny characters. I think I've read this book about 5 times now, and it was just this last reading that I realized this is Huckleberry Finn.
there's the Tom Sawyer section in the beginning where everybody's kind of moving around. Then there's a serious rat trip in the middle, which is Spain. And then at the end, he's goofing over Tom Sawyer, comes back, and in this book, Jake is off by himself, and then Brett comes, and then you have to you wonder why there's a book 3, because in book 2, everything's sort of resolved. But I think he was following his Mark Twain's storyline, and if you remember Huckleberry Finn, there are these funny, there's the king and the duke,
Yeah.
and then there's the Hatfield and McCoy
Yeah.
shooting each other. Well, there's Hardy, the Englishman who comes on a fishing trip. He's just there for laughs. I mean, and he's kind of a goofy Englishman. You can't even believe he's a real character. And then Bill was kind of a goofball too, isn't he? He just says stupid things all the time, and he's sort of.
But I mean, joy, there's no,
Well, the one time there's joy is when they're fishing.
yeah.
But you're right about it. No human being could drink 3 martinis and 3 bottles of wine in one day and still function. So,
Well, were these people functioning?
well, I
And if so,
I didn't
what?
want to be awake.
I mean, they were going through the motions and I don't know, I'd be passed out someplace
Yeah.
long before I ever consumed that much. I don't know.
Yeah.
Seems to me these people are all very desperate because of the disillusionment, disaffection caused by the World War I aftermath. And so drinking can be an escape and a delusion. And then there's so much of it, it becomes ritual. Ritual is always runs the risk of becoming meaningless because it's done over and over again. You lose the sense of why valid ritual may have validity. And so I think Jake tries, I admire Jake. I think he tries to live by a conscientious code, simple values like honesty, intellectual integrity, intellectual honesty, friendship, fidelity to friends. You don't find a lot of that among the other characters. They're all trying to be the center of things. But I really like this book. I read it, used it in classes, high school classes. I think it has a very universal appeal to its audience. I can't remember. I think. Correct me. But was this book was well received initially, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, unlike The Great Gatsby that suffered bad reviews initially. Those how two critics were.
How is this book received when you have high school students read it?
I think they saw the fact of the disillusionment. I mean, they weren't old enough to have learned enough history. And I'm not a World War II veteran or World War I veteran, but they could see the validity of people having all their values destroyed by the awfulness of the internecine destruction of the war, and how they all became, as Gertrude Stein said, a lost generation, lost because they just lost their way. They have nothing that they can adhere to. Patriotism's out, religion's out. The only thing that's left is friendship or fidelity to individuals. This is my take on it.
Do you think, we talked a little bit about this last week, do you think Jake's being wounded in the war is, not impotent, the masculinization, I guess, has anything to do with his credibility as an author, or narrator, I mean? You said like he's the only man with a shred of credibility, a shred of like ethics in there somewhere. Do you think that could be because of his wound?
I certainly think that's something we need to keep in mind. You read is he a credible narrator, or is he, he's not like some of Edgar Allan Poe's narrators, who are not credible at all. They're nuts. But here's a guy who I think, for me, becomes a real character because there's a little bit of self-pity in there, but he doesn't, my way of thinking, he doesn't let that take over his life.
I have a really different take on Jake. I think he's a man who is so involved in the trees, he can't see the forest. And I think when you, in the first book and in the second book, when he starts talking about every street he walks down, or in the second book when he talks about how he gets up and he shaves and he bathes and he puts on his shoes and he ties them in a certain way and he walks down the stairs. This is a man who is so focused on the tiny details of life. He doesn't see the big picture that's going on around him. And he misses what Brett really is. He misses the bigotry in Bill. He misses things, one thing after another. And I don't find a sympathetic character in this book. But that's because I'm 70 years old. When I read it when I was 20, I thought Lady Ashley was the most incredible thing that ever happened. And I desperately wanted to know what was wrong with Jake. But as I've read it many times, I've become less and less enamored. I think this is his second worst book.
Well, I think your
Second worst book.
accentuates the extent to which he tries to live in ritual, tying his shoes, everything the same, because he doesn't, I think he's very much, let's say, I think they're all vaguely aware of the forces around them. But like Dreiser's characters, they're being buffeted about by forces of which they're only vaguely aware and trying to do what they can to shape things. And so I think that's why he goes to those rituals and why I think you pointed out about the fishing trip. The only time that there's any joy in it is when they're out and away from all this civilization that is out in nature.
Yeah, there's ritual, but there's no ritual in describing every building on the street as you walk down, which is what he does. And when he's walking through Paris, he's talking about, Elmore Leonard says, I try to leave out the parts no one reads. Well, those are the parts no one reads. So you want to get through those. And I think Hemingway was trying to show Jake being a guy so focused on maybe the rituals or the everyday things in life that he was missing the big picture. I only thought about that last night, so this is new.
Okay, then who does get the big picture? Anybody?
At the end, I think Brett does when she realizes she's about to destroy the life of a really talented young man. That was her one defining moment there, Romero.
And part of the ritualism, I think, is what helps him get through. I think he is.
It's all he's got.
He's so severely wounded, by the actual wound and the consequences of that wound that, that's what he has to do to keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Well, you were talking about the names of streets and the kind of ritual of that, the kind of ritual of naming specific places. I want to bring up this quote. This is actually from A Pharaoh of the Arms, but it sort of also can be applied to the Sorrows of Right. Reading it right now.
Yeah, that applies.
There were many words that you could not stand to hear, and finally only the names of places had dignity. Certain numbers were the same way, and certain dates, and these with the names of the places were all you could say and have them mean anything. Abstract words such as glory, honor, courage, or hallow were obscene beside the concrete names of the villages, the numbers of roads, the names of rivers, the numbers of regiments and dates. From A Farewell to Arms.
So all these names and places of roads and very specific directions sort of still had that shred of credibility, but not so much that, like you were saying, the forest didn't matter, but the trees mattered.
Maybe they were like a touchstone for someone with obsessive compulsive disorder. Have to name everything you pass, have to name every person you pass, have to name every amount of money you spent on everything that you drank as you went along.
Oh, who could keep
Well-
track of that?
Was he grasping at some element of humanity, of order in the universe? Not finding it, but grasping at least.
It's true.
Those are tangible things you can go and touch. You know, unlike glory or any of the other things he talks about.
He's taking a more simple level and think he's just being like Dickens and he really couldn't think of how to fill out this book.
No, that was the last third of Mark Twain, was a contractual obligation. But I think he was just looking wherever he could find something that grounded him was good for him.
Desperate.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And with Suzanne, I guess, things like, but what have I got left? I have nothing, you know, I can name these streets. You know, I can pet a dog. That's the only reality. They're so desperate.
Maybe he was comfortable with that because of his background as a Catholic, comfortable with the idea of ritual.
He, meaning,
Jake? Yeah. What do you think?
Like my small fight,
that's
that's
a
a ritual.
I don't know. For me, that was a stretch, personally. And I agree that he was a desperate person, and so he needed to hold on to concrete things. But I disagree, like, I wanted to like him, I really wanted to like him, and he is the most likable character. But he's not honorable. He knew he was going to destroy, or it had the potential to destroy that bullfighter, introducing Brett to him. And he went ahead and arranged that anyway. And I don't think that his injury made him honorable. I think his injury is the only thing that kept him from being destroyed by Brett. Because he just would have been another victim if they had been able to fulfill their relationship. And I think it was his survival. And if he hadn't been injured, I think it would have been like Robert. And I think he is bigoted. And I don't think he defended his friends, or he was phony about who his friends were, because he never once came to Robert's defense when they were calling him a kaikin. He never once said a word. You wanted him to just once say, you know, hey, come on, you know, he's our friend. He never defended him. And that disappointed me.
He was jealous. He was terribly jealous.
Ah,
It says it right in the book.
yeah, but I think it's deeper than that. I think it was a character flaw. Yeah, I can't help that. He never had her. He didn't lose his woman. He lost a woman he thought he wanted, and did he really want her because he couldn't have him? And did she really want him because she knew she couldn't have him? If she would have passed him off a long time ago, had that relationship been consummated, I think. But I'm a woman, what do I think? Oh, watch out for that
Trust Jake as a narrator, I guess. Do we trust Jake as a narrator?
He's the only one sober enough to narrate. Well, if you don't trust him as a narrator, where do you go? What do you have?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in here that tells us we shouldn't trust him like there is in Poe's stuff. Where, his name, Fortunato and cast the Amontillado walls up the guy. And you know the narrator's insane there. Or the telltale heart. Guy thinks he hears the heart thumping, all that. But here, wouldn't you agree, would we generally agree that when you start to read a book, the author going to inform us pretty quickly whether this narrator, she or he, is going to be reliable. And if it's first-person narration, as it is here or in The Great Gatsby, I immediately give credibility to the narrators for at least trying to be truthful, but at the same time being, if they don't have any flaws, they're not very real. If they don't have any weaknesses or prejudices or something, they're not going to be very realistic, but I have to believe that what he's saying is an accurate depiction of what happened.
Right, the narrator is generally innocent till proven guilty of being, not credible. And I think, this is an honest telling of what's happening, at least from Jake's perspective. So I think he's being realistic, from what he's seeing.
And the credibility is, Will, right? Mentioned that Huckleberry Finn. Huck Finn has a lot of credibility for me as a narrator.
Right.
But the aesthetic advantage that Twain brings is to have us see the story through the eyes of a 12-year-old. I mean, there's no romance in it, no sex, no romance or anything like that. It's all a movie. And so his naivete accentuates a lot of the things he doesn't realize, but we can see it, like his remarks about religion or church or the feud. Nobody knows what the cause of it was. They just keep killing each other.
Right, or that he thinks because he's seeing Jim as a person and not just a slave, that that makes him a bad person because he's going against the social construct.
Right.
Well, Hemingway said that American fiction begins with their began, rather with him. So in a way that was his model, trying to, and arguably he was using the wound, the emasculation, as a kind of way to lend Jake credibility, I think. In the same way that a non-sexual child has an air of credibility, so does Jake, because he is unable to consummate his relation. Jake, or Brett.
There's one point in there where he says, it's not, if you're going to be friends with a woman, you have to love her first. The love has to come first. Let me see if I have it.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
Women made such swell friends, awfully swell. In the first place, you had to be in love with a woman to have a basis of friendship. I had been having Brett for a friend. I had not been thinking about her side of it. I had been getting something for nothing. That only delayed the presentation of the bill. The bill always came. That was one of the swell things you could count on. It seems to me like his idea of being with Brett is all tied up with the idea of getting what you deserve and getting what you paid for, and there being a bill for everything you get. But also the idea that you can't be friends unless you love somebody. There's so much going on in it.
How do you love somebody without being friends first?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he sees it as the other way around.
But how do you know it's love? It's something, I'm not disputing it,
No.
something ineffable in a relationship where you sense an attraction. I'm sure it's happened to everybody. Why you're attracted to one person more than somebody else in a romantic sense. You can't quite reduce it to so much logic. That would be too bad, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I wonder if, this extended out would tie in with his wound that he can't be friends with anybody because he no longer can love anyone. Is he making that argument?
Well, are you, now wait a minute, are you saying that you can't love someone without sexuality?
Well, he seems to be edging towards that.
men and women.
Men, yeah.
Have friendship with
Yeah.
itself.
I thought it was edging toward the thought that the bill for Brett's friendship was gonna come due in terms of introducing her to Romero.
Ah,
That's where my mind went when I was reading that.
that's a hell of a bill.
That it's a big bill that's coming due, and that might be how he has to pay it.
It's an interesting passage because none of the rest of the book has anything to do with bills coming due. These are people who never pay their bill. And in fact, in the last book, he walks into Brett's room and says it's assembled as only a person who had lived, grown up with servants could assemble. And it's the same thing Fitzgerald said in Gatsby, right? Where the rich break things and expect someone to come behind and pick up after them. So he doesn't really consider anybody paying any bills in here, so it's an interesting side note in this whole book, because everybody else is breaking things on a regular basis and walking away.
He's always talking about how much something costs, how many pesetas something costs.
But there's, given that, there is a kind of pre-capitalist mode that's going when he gets a Babylon. And most things are free because they like American tourists. They're giving him free wine and refusing his wine when he offers it to everyone in the group. And there's kind of this like utopian pre-capitalist ideal that's going on in Spain when they got there.
Isn't that just because of the fiesta? I
Oh,
just thought it was the bonhomie of the fiesta. I'm mixing really bad metaphors there. Yeah, that it was just fiesta and everybody,
There's a party atmosphere.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
party. So we invite you into the party and we don't ask you to pay for the food and drink.
Right.
We don't take your food and drink. You just come and share ours.
There is a power struggle when the bill comes, though. You know, who's gonna pay when the bill comes and one person says, I'll take it, and then other people start saying, no, I'll take it, this is my town, I pay it, you know, all that stuff. It's a power struggle. And at the fiesta, Jake always loses that power struggle.
Loses because he gets stuck with the bill?
No, because he can't take the bill. He can't pay back, he can't be the one that pays for everybody, he can't be the one that supplies the wine for everybody. Yeah, so he's losing that power struggle all the time during the fiesta.
He's the only, aside from the bullfighter, he's the only one who actually does any work.
This is true.
Bill's
Sending his dispatches and stuff.
Bill's a writer for he's some sort of, I don't know, he's a correspondent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Robert published a book, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, no, Bill must be a published writer because he just takes off on Jake for being a newspaper man and will always be a newspaper man and will never be anything else but a newspaper man.
Yeah.
And then an ex-patriot can never write anything good.
I get that backhanded compliment.
Yeah, I mean, Hemingway's writing
Somebody
about
write
himself.
fiction, somebody reported facts and trying to make sense out of what goes on. Two different approaches. I love fiction. Fiction is capital T truth, it's good. Beauty is truth, truth is beauty, that's all you need to know. If you find truth, then you've found beauty, capital T truth.
I want to go back to the idea of ritual. And I've got a pretty good quote here from a secondary source. Let's highlight it. You can read it.
Sure. The incessant drinking in The Sun Also Rises is often read as if it were the defining characteristic of an empty existence. But the reader has only to shift to Spain, where the wine must be drunk expertly out of wineskins, to see how seriously Hemingway takes the simple act of indulgence, and how so mundane a practice as drinking can make one a member of a quasi-religious congregation. What makes all the difference is expertise and the fellowship created by the rules of the expertise, which also have the convenient effect of lifting consumption free of the nasty problem of exchange.
So there is kind of something to that replacement of the Catholic ritual with drinking. Why is that? Why do you think, trying to think how to word this. Why do they, well, when Bill says at the beginning of book 2, no, I don't need a drink right now. Is it a need or is it just something to do? Like, do they need to do it, or are they doing it just like the one was saying it's kind of a just a detail of like in the existence.
I mean, it's like they don't have TV to watch, so they.
Well, Jake does talk a bit about his Catholicism. He's always going to the cathedrals. Doesn't really do much once he gets in there, but it's
Right.
like he keeps being drawn in. There's something there that still resonates with him.
Once a Catholic.
Always.
And he has that exchange with Brett where they're talking about prayer. And Brett says, I never get anything that I pray for, so why bother? You think Jake is coming at it from the same angle? Or
It's a strange attitude towards praying for stuff, like Huck Finn tried prayer, he prayed for some fish hooks, but never got them.
Does that could be a direct parallel?
that is a great parallel.
Well, maybe Jake's, that's testament to his desperation going to the cathedral, you know, not perhaps we might think he doesn't really believe he's gonna find anything, but he's gonna try anyway.
He's trying to fill a void.
Yeah.
He's got a big void in his life, so he's trying, you know, a lot of things to make him whole again, as it were. And one of them is, you know, I'll try going back to church, doesn't really seem to work,
Nothing else
but
works,
he's searching.
nothing in the physical world works. for him.
Yeah.
When Gertrude Stein says, y'all are a lost generation, that gets at when they don't have religion or society or culture to refer to with these like absolute truths anymore. So the absolute truth becomes drinking. They're saying it's nothing you do.
Well, there's always something ritualistic about drinking. I don't mean alcoholics necessarily, just, you know, cocktail hour. It's sort of a soft ritual in our house. You don't drink before.
Does that mean you don't drink whiskey, you only drink beer?
And going to mass is sort of like a spiritual congregation. And going to live the cafe life is sort of a social congregation.
Mm.
So I think that there's a parallel in there somewhere, but in either case, you can take it to excess, I guess.
Yeah, Frank, this is an odd group of people we're talking about. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and Dos Passos, and all the people that were expatriates. They're not really what's going on in the world. If you look at Russia after the revolution in 1918 and before Lenin came in, there's an explosion of creativity. Artists are going all over the place. People are writing all these sorts of things. It's happening in the United States. all the things that were suppressing through ritual and other reasons went away. There was an explosion in creativity. The art world is amazing. Physics is going nuts. And then there's Sinclair Lewis writing Babin. He's talking about a completely different problem of people being too conformist as opposed to, this is not the 1920s of the world. This is the 1920s of a rather privileged, spoiled, upper middle class group of people who decided to go to Paris because they couldn't handle the dissolution of the American dream after World War I.
But what was in Paris that drew them? I mean, France was pretty well destroyed.
Cheap living. American dollar went a very long way.
Sherwood Anderson said Paris is where it's happening, and sent Hemingway there.
And I think they all said that.
Yeah.
That was the heart of where all the creativity was, and they wanted to go there, and there was no reason to stay at home.
It also attracted all the groupies and the pretenders. As Hemingway remarked, there's a class, something like, there's a class of people who desperately sought individuality and achieved only a mass conformity of eccentricity of dress or something like that.
There was a huge American group in Paris in the early 20s. And, I know it was 25,000, 50,000, something like that. But it was a lot of folks.
It was a
Did he
place.
say that?
I'm sorry.
What?
No, I was just going to say, from what I understand, if you were going to drop out, that was the place to go. Like in the 60s, you'd go to a commune in Colorado or wherever it was. So it was
San Francisco.
Yeah.
or maybe flowers in your hair. So it was, if you were going to drop out, that was the place where you wanted to drop out to be cool.
There was good literature and art being produced, but a lot of other people.
Yes, just were along for the ride.
Groupies.
Yeah.
I think it was Fitzgerald who said about Paris, Paris will never take anything away from you. It can offer you the ability to create your own aura and your own environment.
Did he say like you were quoting earlier on the train? I can't remember, on the train with the other American family with the child. I can't quite place the quote you were saying.
Join me.
Yeah, sorry.
I was referring not to anything in this book. It was a documentary made years ago. Andrew Duggan was the narrator, and I'll tell you how old it is. You remember Andrew Duggan? But there was that thing about the eccentricity of dress, the uniformity of the eccentricity of dress about all the people that Hemingway was encountering, and all the people, so many of the people who were trying to be individualistic but achieving only a conformity.
Yeah.
Mass nonconformity, my father used to call it, sir. And we all have to have long hair. We all have to have these button-down collars. We all have to have bass weeds.
I think my Fitzgerald line was,
Remember that.
it's not what Paris gives you, but what it doesn't take away.
Yeah.
I think is the line.
What do you think
I'm a
of
big
the
Faulkner fan.
Oh, I'm a huge Faulkner fan, but that's not.
He's one of the big three that didn't make it to Paris. I mean, he went over there. I think he said, it's not for me. I gotta go back.
Wait, who are you speaking of?
William Faulkner. I gotta go back to Oxford and write about what I know instead of this. So.
Faulkner goes way over my head most of the time, though, but I am a fan. But poor Sherwood Anderson, though, gave founder of leg up to, and then later in his career he threw under the bus. Same thing with Hemingway's. Porsche or whatever.
It's funny how much they talk themselves into, I have to be in a certain place in order to be someone. I have to be in Paris to be a writer. I have to be in Pamplona to be an exciting person. You know, I have to be, you know, wherever. It's like everybody's feeding themselves this line. If I only find the perfect place, then all my troubles will disappear. Isn't
that human nature though?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, it's interesting that.
These are people who can do it though.
Yeah, they've lost all kinds of connections to how things are done, but they haven't lost this idea that it's the place that will make me, rather than the idea that I will turn the place into the place where I am, you know, wherever I am.
Well, in book one, when Robert Conan's saying, I want to go to South America, let's go to South America, he says, can't go to America to get away from yourself. So even though he says that, he does very much like think I need to be here in order to be seen. I wish I had that quote in front of me, but what else? What do you think is indicated by the family on the train? When he's on the train to go fishing, and the American family with the young boy who also is that indicative of like his disappointment in places that he wants to go because they're coming too touristy?
Yeah, I can't recall the incident, but does it have something to do with the juxtaposition of innocence with corruption, or innocence with disillusionment, little boy?
Yeah, maybe.
Or I quote it more as a contrast between, you know, what we would consider mainstream, and then these folks are the bohemians, you know, and he's just trying to show, you know, all right, even though they're mainstream, they're still actually okay. And, you know, the bohemians who think they're so cool, maybe not so much.
Highlighted.
Yeah. Well, you might read the quote.
Listen, Robert, going to another country doesn't make any difference. I follow that. You can't get away from yourself by moving from one place to another. There's nothing to that.
So even though he says that, he seems to live by the opposite of that advice.
Well, he ran away once, right, to Paris.
Right.
And then he found that he fit. Didn't want to move. A lot of people go to New York for a couple of years, never go back.
The people on the train made me think of, what's that line from Yeats about the worst being filled with a terrible certainty? They were so sure that they were right. They just radiated the idea that they were right. And here's Jake and his friends, and they do things, but they don't seem particularly certain that it's right. They just seem to think, okay, well, let's do this now. But the contrast with the people on the train who are sure that they know what ought to be done, and they know they've got the idea on this guy, they've got him figured out. You know, the contrast between the people that had been through the wars, you know, were living in Europe and knew how the other people that went through the wars were living, contrasted with the people that stayed home in America and weren't really on the front lines in any sense. And you can see how the confidence of rightness has dropped away from the people that went through the wars.
They live for the moment. They live in the moment.
There's nothing else.
They don't think about the future. They don't really think too much about the past. They just, what's happening now.
Remind you of the sixties, that saying, feels good, do it. No ratiocination at all.
Yeah, the war in Vietnam was a pretty wrenching thing. I mean, not like World War I, but, you know, for my purposes, it might as well have been. But that was very, I mean, we're still, I don't know, I don't think World War I is over, and certainly Vietnam's not over. It just keeps coming back. Just part of us, you know.
Well, two great wars united the country. Vietnam divided it.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest.
Because there's no purpose.
Insisting I'm right.
Well, in World War II, there were the American Firsters, which was a pretty powerful movement with, who's the guy?
Lindbergh. Yeah.
Lindbergh was leading that.
Isolationist.
We're kind of bringing that up
Like the
earlier.
Democrats 2
Well,
days ago.
the post-World War I period in general was not a happy time for America, you know, despite the image of the 1920s lynchings were probably at their height. We had a president who was an outright racist, Wilson.
Oh,
We
yeah.
had the Palmer raids, the Red Scare, and probably the worst race riots America's ever had.
There's
Chicago especially.
Yeah.
what was that? The big one in Oklahoma?
Yeah,
Tulsa.
Tulsa, yeah. So it was not happy times in America.
Yeah.
And the stock market had crashed early, not like it did in '29, but it was at a low point during part of the '20s and then boomed again. But there was not a lot there. There was not a firm foundation
Yeah.
for what was happening then. I mean, I think World War I was devastating, you know, even though we didn't get the worst of it in
Yeah.
fighting.
Do you think that just the reason why they were so their characters in the Center Threats were feeding off of like European disillusionment?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like we went and saved these people. And so what? What's it mean? Yeah.
What I was really interested in the point made several times in the album that people have a aficionado for the bullfights. And Jake has it and Romero has it at the same time. But Jake is only a spectator. He isn't taking place in the actual sport besides being a spectator.
Is there an analogy to football now?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the
Or sports in
armchair
general?
quarterbacks and, yeah.
No, but it's become, God, almost a way of life in modern America. Well, the world really, if you look at soccer, but this devotion, absolute devotion to sports is, I've always considered it strange, but it seems to happen during periods of time when there's not much else, you know, to believe in or get wholeheartedly behind.
Well, it becomes a secular religion,
Yeah, right.
you know, something, sure, you know, I believe in the, in spite of the outcome, I believe in the Yankees.
Frank, don't go there.
In spite of how bad they played this weekend. You know, so it gives you something to look forward to hold on to, and I think for Jake, you know, he's got the afición for the bullfighting, so it shows that he's got a passion for something, in spite of, you know, his kind of blasé attitude about a lot of other things.
The hell of a thing to call a sport, though.
Yeah.
Oof.
I mean, how's it any, well, I guess it's more violent than football, but
Oh, I think, yeah, I mean,
I mean, they're not intending to kill people in football, but manage to do it, albeit slowly.
Well, Jake kind of has a reason for liking, brutality, and because he is trying to make up for being emasculated by the mood. And I don't want to get too off topic, but what are American men missing that they feel they need to replace by football? To extend that analogy.
it's not just men.
What's
Oh,
the
no,
It's not.
It's a vicarious experience.
yeah.
It's a what?
Vicarious experience, like living my life through my children's successes, athletics or academics or whatever I might have, instead of living my own life.
But also, the ascribing of meaning to sports, I don't understand it myself. But
You never played sports.
I was always a little geeky kid with bad eyes.
Well, they also do that with arts. The devotion to a musical group or a singer or something like that. Where everything about their life and everything they say on Twitter is life or death and all of that kind of thing. The same thing happens in arts. Filling in for what you can't do yourself in one sense, all the little.
Yeah, but you don't see art on TV practically every night of the week in the fall.
Well, I don't know. I mean, all the shows on,
MTV.
yeah, well, yeah, MTV,
Yeah.
but I'm
Or
thinking more
Netflix.
like The Voice and
I heard this is 13-year-old girls.
that's true. That is a good quote.
It's a psychosis of the mob. Just like any other sport, really. Psychosis of the mob. Everybody's just like you. You're all crazy right at that moment. And you can't help it. You swept up in that. No matter how rational you think you are at that moment, you're right there with it.
It's hard for me to think about the bullfight, the role of the bullfights in this book, without remembering what I can of Hemingway's explanation of the bullfight, the Spanish tradition of the tragedy, the death of the bull being the tragedy, but it's not just a ritual, it's not just a blood sport, it's something that was come down from
Dinner.
years and years, decades, centuries of the practice as a part of their culture. And I don't disapprove of bullfights. A lot of people do. I remember going to see them, enjoying the spectacle. I don't know, maybe that makes me not such a good guy. In our society today, at the time, 50 years ago, nobody was objecting much. But that tree, what's the name? Is it Death in the Afternoon? Is that
Yeah.
the one where it's pretty long, but it is very good at explaining the significance of the bullfight to the Spanish culture.
As a cultural artifact.
Yeah,
Okay.
and not as just a blood sport where people go like watching gladiators or something like that. It had more, or at least he ascribed to it a greater meaning than just a blood sport.
Well, this Spanish culture is machismo. There's a real incredible pride in that bullfighter, right?
Yeah.
You do not move your feet with a 2-ton animal coming at you.
And you don't do the tricks
Right.
that the lesser bullfighters
Right.
do.
He wants
as
the
they get
pages.
older.
Well, it's like the ultimate ritual. We're talking about ritual. What could be a bigger one than bullfighting?
Yeah.
Yeah, and pageantry, all the parading and picadors and the matadors walking out, and the music playing. Like the band at halftime.
Can we go back to the idea of financial and humor?
Oh, I just said, I don't remember anybody talking about money except Jake, how much something cost.
Mike, every other, he's broke.
Yeah.
But he was talking about being broke, but I mean, in terms of how much things were and who was paying, it seemed to only be Jake who was talking about, well, this cost this and this cost this, and did I get a good deal on the hotel room or on the food or the wine skins? How many pesetas was something? It was like Jake was the only one who's, I don't know, I read it as if he was the only one who was sober enough to think about how much the bill was gonna be.
But that was also part of his enumeration of everything. I walked down this street, I went to this bar, met whoever, went to that bar and we met these other folks, you know. So he's, I don't know if it's compulsive, but, you know, he is the one who documents what they do and how much it costs. I figured that struck me as just part of that aspect of his character.
Yeah.
Taking care of the table. The light, somebody has to pay, we gotta know what it is.
Yeah, he's, like we discussed last week, he seems to be the ringleader, the responsible one. So it's natural that he would be the one who knows. And since it's his story and he's the one paying, you know, it didn't strike me as odd that he's the one who says, and I had to pay this and that and so forth.
Well, he strikes me, I find him sympathetic because I think he's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to be faithful to his friend. He's trying to take care of details. He's limited physically by his emasculating wound. And that limits him, I suppose, in his attitudes. You know, so as I was suggesting before, maybe there's a little bit of self-pity there. It makes him more human for me. He's not just some brash guy who says, yeah, I lost my sexual ability, but I'm a tough guy. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do wonders and eat cucumber.
Why do you think Hemingway never says what's wrong? And in fact, you read last week, he said he had his testicles. He says in the book, I'm not impotent. What is wrong with him? And why doesn't Hemingway actually say it? He can't perform. Well, then he's impotent, isn't he? But he says, I'm not impotent. It's an odd thing. I mean, is it just because it's the 1920s and you can't talk about it?
Might be. I thought I missed that one. Jake says, I'm not impotent.
He says it.
Oh, no, it was a quote from,
No, he's talking, in the book, he says, I'm not impotent.
He said he was intact, but
He says what?
even that he was intact, he had everything he should have, it just didn't work.
Yeah, but he says, I'm not impotent. Quote, I am not impotent. So what is wrong with him and why isn't Hemingway being clear about it?
yeah, the quote used right to was one, I don't have the book with me, but from an interview Hemingway did in the early 50s with the Paris Review. The interviewer said, is Jake like a steer? Like the way in the novel he said, what is, bulls have no balls. Said over and over again. So, and the implication the interviewer was saying is that Jake is emasculated like a steer. And then Hemingway said, how dare you say that? And like almost, got very defensive and said specifically that his spermatic nerve was intact, and his testicles were intact, he just was unable to cut.
But then in the book he says, I'm not impotent.
And where does he get it? I don't
In a
remember.
conversation with Bill, I can't remember where, probably.
Oh, right, when they're fishing.
Yeah, they were asleep somewhere.
Yeah.
Is impotence just the physical side of the sex act, or does it have to do with being sterile?
Has to do with not being able to have an erection.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
only the physical side.
Yeah,
So he could have valid sperm, he could have
I don't know.
productive sperm.
It's
but
not
he can't
clear
get
here.
Right.
Well, I was trying to make sure I understood impotence as it's used here.
I don't know, I always thought it was just because you could talk about it in the 1920s. Even in, after World War II, mailers naked and dead. I mean, all these soldiers going around saying thug.
Maybe Hemingway's leaving it open so that you can think, is this a psychological wound?
Yeah.
yeah, it is invisible either way.
Yeah. You know, everybody seems to be pretty much on the side that they don't care for this crowd. You know, they're not people you want to hang out with.
Oh,
But
poor
I-
guy.
Yeah, well,
So you get to know them.
As long as you didn't have to pick up the tab.
But that seemed really accurate to me for young people because it seems to me that at some point in your life, you have a group of people that are your guys. It's your crowd. And they're your crowd and they're your mates, you know, whatever the word is you want to use. No matter what sort of horse's asses they might be. And often it's like in college or something where there's one that if you had to take this person individually, you really couldn't stand to be around them. You wouldn't recommend them to anybody you really cared about, anything like that. But you still get together and you hang out and, you know, all of that. There's something about being inside the circle or outside the circle. And it's like they're all clinging together. They're a bunch of people adrift that are all hanging on to one another to be able to float enough so that they can keep their heads above water.
Kids, very sturdy form.
That's the thing, though. They're kids in a really significant way that they have never made that step, you know, that failure to launch, they called it a few years ago.
Arrested development.
Yeah, they haven't made that step into adulthood. They're still stuck at that stage where you just go out partying with your mates every night. You know, that's what you do. And they're stuck there. So I have some sympathy for them as characters in that stage, you know, because it's not about whether they're likable or not. It's about whether they're in or outside of your group. But at the same time, I feel like kicking them all in the ass and say, get on with it, find something, move your life along. You know, you can't stay here. You're sinking here. You can't stay here. And
they were saying that the fear, though, is Europe, and they chose to be there.
well, it's also a state of mind. They chose to be in the state of mind. Choose, I'm using that loosely. I mean, they didn't really choose. Circumstances happened that messed them up so much that they kind of lost their ability to make that choice. So they're stuck, you know, and they need something to get them unstuck. And they're trying different things. They're trying fishing and going to the bullfights. They're trying drinking. They're trying sex. You know, whatever might shake the cage enough to get them rolling again. So I have some sympathy for them.
That's the whole thought of it is depressing. You know?
Yeah, it's not a happy thought. It's
I
just.
find myself late in life fascinated, fearful of fascism. And that sort of attitude, you know, on a large social scale,
Yeah,
feeds into it
yeah.
as we're sitting down.
Oh, yeah. In group and out group.
Yeah. Which was, I guess, Robert Cohn's.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about that on.
Historically, it's about the outsider.
Well, I guess that's why Hemingway chose to make him Jewish.
Yeah.
Just kind of reinforces the outsider, the outsiderness, that's his word.
Raises the question, why didn't he make him black?
Because there would have been.
Well,
Oh, there wouldn't have been any friends, yeah.
They couldn't drink in the same places.
That would be
Well, I
too
think that
far.
wasn't that one of the reasons for France though after World War One,
Yeah, well,
because the racial structures were a lot
Yeah,
less.
yeah, they are.
We talked about this a little last week, but as far as Robert's behavior, is he Jewish other than the fact that Jake and Bill and Mike prod him for being so?
I don't know how to answer that
Yeah.
question.
I'm not sure I know what you're asking. Are you asking, does he practice
Does it
Judaism?
roll his
Or
behavior?
does he have the stereotype, the negative connotation?
Both, maybe? I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question.
I don't see anything particularly Jewish about him. He's creepy.
He's the most goy Jew I've ever heard of.
Yeah,
Boxer.
that's what I'm getting at. He boxes, he went to Princeton, he
Football.
has an affair. Yes, he played for volleyball. He actually consummates the affair with Brett.
He's just creepy. I mean, lurking around outside where Brett is and following Brett and Mike around. That part's creepy, but I don't think there's a religious
No,
affiliation to
Yeah.
creepy.
But it just was to reinforce the outsider.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing wrong with this guy, well, other than the creepiness.
But only, that's only toward Brett.
But he's in his 30s too, I think.
Yeah.
So he's acting more like he's 19, 20. First time he got laid, he just can't get over it.
right? And he's mooning over the girl. And in fact, it's not, at the beginning, at least Jake is saying that he's Robert's friend and is speaking positively of him, but it changes after Robert and Brett have their little fling. And then, as someone else said earlier, Jake is jealous and turns on Robert. And, other than them saying he's Jewish, he doesn't, I don't know that anything he does exhibits anything that, objectively identifies.
He's acting like a typical male in Heat.
Yeah, very much so. He's an immature guy who's swooning over his first affair. And just hanging around and, Brett says, we did it, it's done, it's over, go away, and he doesn't want to go away.
It's interesting though, he's been married before and he has kids.
Yeah.
And you don't even hear anything about the kids.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
like an inconvenience that got left behind.
Well, Hemingway left his kid alone. Not too.
Yeah, the first one.
Just a few weeks after this book was published. Right?
Well, I think I just wonder why I guess it's a way that was acceptable in the 1920s was to make someone an outsider by saying they were Jewish. It was like a convenient shortcut to making them an outsider.
So it's true.
Yeah,
At the time, it wasn't until, I was born 1945, but I think it was during my early childhood years that the Ivy Leagues began to accept Jews. Am I wrong about that? I mean, I think it was.
In any
earlier,
numbers, in any
and
numbers, yeah.
private country clubs and golf clubs.
it took them longer.
They wouldn't accept Jews or blacks, and a lot of them wouldn't accept Catholics, isn't that right?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of discrimination against Catholics.
Didn't know that.
It was a little early.
So where did I go? I got lost in the details. I know, I was going to suggest that the writer uses his Jewishness as a rhetorical device or some sort of writing device that helps to make that group a little bit more representative. I mean, they're all basically white Anglo-Saxons, except for the Spaniards, and except for Cone. Jake's Catholic, I don't know what the others are. He didn't make a point about that, but did he? Was just, so the Jew, but I don't recall anything in here that made me think that the tone was against Jews or against Jewishness or Judaism.
Bill was.
Just Bill.
Yeah.
Bill was,
Yeah.
Mike too, I
Yeah, Mike had his moments.
Yeah.
Well, especially when she went off on
Right.
he really.
Right.
But
so does that?
they talk about
point out to you-
what is Mike? What is
What's
Mike?
with him?
What a whip!
Yeah.
You want to just smack him, you know? Stand up.
I think his only reason for being there is he probably had some money.
He was broke.
No, he was the
Oh, that's
guy,
right.
he was the guy who
He
was
was always
bankrupt.
waiting
Yes.
for money to come.
Yeah.
But I thought that was originally in book one, I thought that was why Brett was marrying him, was because he had money.
He owed everybody.
Those two kind of conflicted in my mind.
Well, he came from money, and I took it as Brett was hooking up with him because he had money, but by the time we get to book two, we find out, oops, no, he doesn't, he's bankrupt now. And I don't think Brett goes off with him even towards the end, you know, even in that last.
She says she does, but you don't know.
Right, and I took that as yet another, you know, fling Brett had, and, you know, she's done with this guy and he's out of the picture, even if that's what she's saying.
He should have been out of the picture.
Yeah, whoever did the cover on him for the original book, I assume that to be Brett. That the picture's kind of disturbing. Yeah, to put it mildly.
Could you hold it up?
Yeah, well,
And for the,
Oh, yeah. I think
it's kind of an Aubrey Beardsley kind of.
Yeah.
at one point, in the book,
Mentioned there.
Jake describes her
She'd have close clothes.
or likens her to Cersei.
Yes, Cersei. It just looks like Beardsley to me.
It's just, I find it disturbing. I mean, that's a dissipated person.
Well, I was really, we were talking about how Jake needs to, has this like obsessive idea in writing that he needs to describe every detail, every street. But there's one passage, it's in part one, where he's drinking with the grid count and Brett in his hotel room. And the action is really slowed down, where he's talking about every aspect of drinking this champagne. And then Brett says, let's pop the cork. And the very next sentence is, it was a lovely champagne. He skips the whole, you know, we popped the cork. He poured the glasses. He did this and that, but no, it was just a great champagne. And I was really struck by that. I think that was the only time he really skipped around in a big way.
But Brett was there.
And oh yes, Brett was there, good point.
Sometimes when you're writing, you get tired, you just want to end the scene.
Are you suggesting there was some significance to the fact that he's very descriptive and then just jumps to the conclusion?
Yes, let me bring up one of,
I remember that saying, but I don't remember being stopped by it.
Yeah, that didn't jump out at me.
No,
it jumped out at me given rather some of, let me pull it up. Some of Ezra Pound's notes, like galley notes that he gave him. Pound said, use absolutely no word that does not contribute to the presentation. And Hemingway later gave that, it's like, no, I learned that as a newspaper man because the Kansas City Star told me to use short sentences, use short paragraphs, use vigorous English, be positive, not negative. But it was really Ezra Pound's notes that made him write the way he did. So he's trying to discard all of this, like Hemingway, or Harold told me to cut a lot. I think it was like 5,000 words off the beginning of the novel. So he's trying to own a lot of these decisions. Hemingway is. And not necessarily giving the credit to
But this book isn't that way, is it? This book is long sentences, it is full of
Yeah.
stuff, and it is not abrupt. This is, so I thought that this is the least Hemingway book that of all the things I've read, that Hemingway's written. Even you go to the next book, it's much more in that description, and by the time he gets to Farewell to Arms, he's just pounding you.
yeah.
What was the next book after this?
Is it For Whom the Bell Tolls? I'm not sure, I think it's For Whom the Bell Tolls.
That champagne scene, I just looked it up and I'd forgotten, the Count gets to showing off his war wounds, which are arrow wounds, weirdly enough. You know, that's kind of strange, getting together with people and showing off your wounds.
I think that was only the second time Jake had met the Count.
Yeah.
So that's pretty quick to start,
Got
you
his
know,
shirt
lifting your shirt up and showing that your body.
Yeah, take your clothes off and show me your wounds.
Yeah, but if you're wounded,
Oh, it's a badge of honor?
yeah, that's something you.
Okay. You probably show up that you survived.
So is Jake.
Yeah, but he was, at least we hope he was.
Maybe that's what they skipped over.
Did what?
Maybe that's what they skipped over.
T.S. Eliot said interestingly that the modern novel needs to be read like a poem, you know, with the same scrutiny.
Sorry,
Can you-
when you say modern novel, what period of time are you talking about?
1914 to 1945, yeah.
Not today.
No. No. Definitely not. But he said you need to slow down and really appreciate modern novels as poems. Can you say that about this book? That you really need to slow down and interpret it with the scrutiny of the poem.
It's pretty hard on
Tall
those.
order to me.
That's pretty hard on this description of, I thought they were never gonna get to the hotel when they were going to Spain. It's like, and then the hill went up and then the hill went down. And here, and, you know, it's like, okay, can we just get to some action here?
The road trip.
This book could be about 20% smaller.
Okay, yes, that's exactly what I
Yeah.
think.
I thought it started as a short story.
I thought it started as a diary and didn't progress much past that in a lot of ways. When he goes into those descriptions, like you're thinking of somebody who was just writing what they had written down when it happened.
Journalistic, almost.
Even, a journalist wouldn't be allowed to go wandering down the streets like that, you know. The lead's in the first sentence, right?
Well, it's more like a narrative than it is a report.
Yeah.
If you're going to report an event, that's one thing, but if you're writing, a narrative about your experience in Newfoundland over the summer, as a friend of mine just did.
Exactly. It's more of a diarist.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of Anna Snin in a way, that she's just writing what's happening right then and that moment.
There was a book written in 2016 called Everybody Behaves Badly by Leslie Bloom, who's a writer. Who she's writing for. Anyway, I want to say Vanity Fair. In any event, Vogue, Vanity Fair, Vogue, and the Wall Street Journal. And it's the story of the people behind The Sun Also Rises that all took a trip with Hemingway to Spain the year before, in 2016, and 19, let's see, what did she say it was. In any event, she talks about all the people and who they actually were in real life, and they went on a trip with Hemingway to Spain.
And what's the name of that book?
People behaving badly. Everybody behaves badly. The backstory to The Sun Also Rises. And she says it started when she saw a picture of Hemingway with an entourage of attractive and rather mischievous-looking people sitting around a cafe table in Pamplona in 1925. And the woman sitting next to Hemingway had a very beguiling look about her. She was lank. She was coquettish. And I was immediately drawn to her. And apparently half of Paris was drawn to her at one point also.
Here's the picture.
Yeah, there it is.
We got a picture.
Wow. So that's Lady Greta.
The real life, counterpart.
Yeah.
Duff Wisdom.
The lady was up twice.
Winning Tuesday, something like that.
She was a dissolute but sublime creature who was over in Paris waiting out a divorce from her aristocratic husband, and she turned out to be a real inspiration. Anyway, just an interesting.
Well, she, along with a lot of other people at the time, she was Hemingway of simply writing a room on a cliff. There wasn't much hiding who
Who's who?
then, hiding who Hemingway was talking about,
Yeah.
his real life figures.
I think it was the documentary that said the original name for the narrator was Ham. And they were all like, it was a necessity for him to change all the names so he wouldn't be sued.
Yeah.
I was not here last week. Did anything ever come up about, I think it's a spurious criticism of the writer to say that he cannot write convincingly about women. But that was a criticism that was often levied at him, at least back in the 60s and 70s.
What do you mean by conventionally?
Convincing.
Oh, convincingly. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
So I mean,
There's
Lady,
stuff right
I don't think Hemingway intended Lady Rat to be typical of women.
I thought he was.
And I think that Catherine in
Yeah, you're right.
Farewell is very believable, but the focus is not on her. The focus is on, what's his name? Frederick Henry. And not, so and then there are other, it reminds me of that spurious claim that I heard when I was in graduate school about William Faulkner. He can't write authoritatively about what it is to be a black man because he's not black.
Yeah.
And I just thought, what use is that comment? I mean, so maybe he shouldn't include blacks at all, right? I mean, the stupidity of it.
In Mississippi.
But he can write about his own perceiving of what it's like to be black. And you do know his strongest characters are blacks and women. Strongest of the strong are black women.
The
idea that he was being condescending or something, I think is, I got off the top here, but Hemingway's treatment of women, did that come up last week or is that something?
No,
not really. No, I think it should have. Though we talked about Brett being like an example of the new woman, like kind of a clever idea, but we didn't talk about that at all. It's interesting that you bring up thoughts kind of aside. But one of the reasons why I wanted to have a discussion about Hemingway is because of Norton, Norton, the publisher that does annotated versions of novels. I think it was 2021, came out with their edition of Sun Also Rises. And it's I don't have with me to show around, but it's really well done. And I think in February of next year, they're doing an edition of Light in August. That is,
That'll be a challenge.
yeah. I'm very much looking forward to that, though.
Did you say it's an annotated?
Yeah, they're annotated, and at the end of the books, they have a bunch of critical essays about the novel. And same thing with Son of the Rises. So if you want to get really nerdy about some Hemingway, they also released, or put out rather, an edition of In Our Time, I think, that came out in the same iteration as The Sun Also Rises. And In Our Time is a lot more like fragmented in the Elliot sense than Sun Also Rises.
So the Norton edition is The Sun Also Rises, an annotated edition or something like that?
Yeah. And W.W. Norton is the publisher. And the Light in August comes out, and I think it's early next year.
Made a mistake of trying to use that in senior English.
All right, well, I think I'm gonna wrap it up. And I will see everyone next week.